Good day, two-wheel friends. Zack here with RevZilla, and welcome to another episode of Daily Rider. Our guest today is a 1974 Honda XL250. That is a half-century-old air-cooled on-off-road motorcycle, and it's important because in many ways it marked the beginning of a whole new generation of dual-sport machines and riders. So on the way to work today, we'll talk about how the XL250 rides, how it compares to modern machines, and how this particular bike could be yours. Let's go, everybody. Okie doke. Before we get going with this XL250 Daily Rider, a quick reminder that May is Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. And while we here at RevZilla always want you to ride safe, this May RevZilla has launched the Airbag Save campaign at RevZilla.com/airbags. To learn all there is to know about the latest safety innovations in the world of motorcycling, click on the link in the description of this video. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Another thing it's important to address here before we get going on this daily ride is that this particular XL250 has been restored and modified by none other than Ari Henning at the Shop Manual to celebrate the Cycle Gear 50th anniversary. There's a Cycle Gear 50th anniversary sweepstakes, which is taking place right now. You can click on the link in the description of this video to enter, and once I'm done with it, this bike could land in your garage alongside a brand new Honda Transalp. All you have to do is click the link in the description, enter the sweepstakes, and this bike could be yours. As for what you're getting if you win the sweepstakes, well, that's what this daily ride is all about. We're not going to cover every single thing that was done to this motorcycle because that list is too extensive. It's obviously been restored quite beautifully with fresh paint, fresh upholstery, fresh grips, fresh levers, fresh rubbers on all the things like this. But it goes so much deeper than that. There's just way too many things to talk about in total. A few things that stood out to me that I thought were pretty cool was that Ari cut and lengthened the swing arm to try to keep the proportions a little bit better once the rear suspension stroke was lengthened. The fork is actually from a CRF 250F model year 23 or 24 or something like that. It's a modern fork with gold valve emulators, which will be covered on the Shop Manual as well. Point being, it's a modern front suspension setup and updated and upgraded rear suspension setup, which is why there's a disc brake. As for the tires, these are Shinko Golden Boy tires. These tires are the same ones we used on our XL350 and Yamaha DT1 that we rode across Wyoming for CTXP, and the same rubber that Ari used on the CT90 Honda that he rode across Alaska for our CTXP adventure. So tried and true tires there on the XL250. Other nifty things on this bike, it's a fully integrated LED taillight and blinker setup into the frame rail of the XL250, which is pretty cool. So there's no classic taillight and blinker setup. It's just all kind of integrated, which makes it look a little bit more like a racy kind of dual sport from the 70s instead of so much of a street bike. And these fairly bright and impressive LED turn signals up here, which you'll see from the cockpit probably as we ride. All of the sort of lights and blinkers and stuff have been made to be very sleek on this bike. On the topic of electronics, actually, we should take a quick moment to pop the seat up here, and I can show you the Moto Gadget brain in this sucker. Here it is. There's a more detailed explanation from Ari in the Shop Manual episode, but this is basically the whole central nervous system of the bike right here. And it connects to your phone. You can change the characteristics of the blinkers. It's extremely streamlined and modern. And it's what he chose to modernize this vintage dual sport for obvious reasons, because it's sort of the state of the art, which is pretty nifty. Aside from that, you got this Moto Gadget retro dash on here, which is sort of like a single dial thing. We'll talk a little bit more about how it works as we ride, but I do want to point out the meticulous work that Ari did to seat this thing just above the headlight and run the wiring directly into the headlight bucket and mount the headlight at exactly the right height, along with this plate that was custom made and attached to the triple clamp for the bike to make this whole thing just sit super smooth and clean. I don't even know how many man hours went into figuring out how this all works. When you look at it, it looks sort of natural and clean, but yeah, it's emblematic of how much work went into this bike. Last thing I'll mention is the engine, which was torn down and rebuilt. Every nut and bolt and bearing in there was refinished, refurbished, or replaced. Yeah, I think it's about 250 cc's, might be a little bit more. I don't remember what he said, 260, 265, something like that. It's not technically a big bore kit. It's just slightly larger cylinder from having a high compression piston put in and fitted to a cylinder that was honed to clean it and restore it, rather than use the sleeve as it was, which was in pretty rough shape. And you got an aftermarket Mikuni carb on there that he had to machine down and make fit so he could maintain the retro side cover. There's just too much to talk about. There's too much to talk about. And it's all covered pretty well in Ari's episode of the shop manual, which of course is yet another link in the description of this video that you can click on. For now, let's take this sucker for a spin, shall we? I think it's time. I think it's time. There's no electric start, so we're going to flick this bad Melberg on. We're going to go like this. We're going to stand on the foot pegs. I find that's the easiest way to do it. And we're going to kick it to life. And just like that, there it goes. It's it's a very polite sounding bike. It's a stock exhaust, which again was totally refurbished and redone. We can take a peek at that while we're at it, I suppose. It's really cool. It's got this sort of like nifty retro cheese grater heat shield on it, which I think is awesome. Oh, gas isn't on. There we go. Good call, Zack. All right, everybody. Let's ride to work 50 years ago. Kind of. Okay, so some basic specs. I know we talked about the engine size, which I wasn't really clear on exactly how big the engine is. And get used to that, because I don't have a lot of information on this bike, in part because it's 50 years ago that it was made, and in part because it's custom, right? The seat height, for example, I looked it up, and it's about 33 inches, I think, is what it was stock. Of course, this bike has you know, slightly longer suspension. It's got longer swing arms, it's got all sorts of stuff that's different. It feels like about 33 inches to me, I'll say that. And the seat is pretty wide and plush compared to modern dual sport bikes, but it's still a very narrow machine, obviously. That makes it fairly approachable, I would say. As for horsepower from the engine, again, you know, a little bit unclear since it's rebuilt and it's high compression, this and that. Whoops, I'm about to miss my turn. We got to turn left here because we're not going on the freeway. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. Apologies. Anyway, it's not really clear how much horsepower it makes, but I think they claimed 23 horsepower back in the day. So, you know, let's say that 23 horsepower and enough torque to take you down the road. I believe top speed was claimed to be 76 miles per hour back in 1974, and that does mean that it's legal to take on the freeway, but because I don't want to, I'm not going to go down the freeway. We're going to take neighborhood streets because that's where the bike's happiest, and there's no real need to hold it wide open right now, I don't think. To wind out the discussion of specs, I believe it is a 2.4 gallon gas tank, and on the Daily Rider scales, it came in at 285 pounds, so it is a fairly light motorcycle, everybody. It feels not short, but pretty approachable to sit on. Feels very light, and the whole thing just feels compact and simple, you know? It doesn't feel as small to sit on as like a mini bike or something, but when you stare down at the dash, or you sort of feel the general presence that you get from the bike with a really narrow gas tank and this wide handlebar, it still just feels extremely kind of simple and pure. That's what you want, I would say. As for the general feeling of rolling down the road, it's a happy little machine to putt along like this. I'm in fourth gear right now. We're going 35, 38 miles an hour. Whoop. And we're breaking the speed limit apparently, so I'll slow down a little bit. It is a 5-speed gearbox. When you really kind of wind it out to 6,000 RPM, which is the sort of upper third, I guess, of the rev band, let's get a little vibey. Just kind of understandable, I suppose, from a basic single cylinder bike from 50 years ago. In general, at this speed, putting along fourth, fifth gear, it's sort of like smooth. It's an agreeable riding position. The foot pegs are high and the handlebar is fairly close to the seat, as you'd expect. So it's a nice compact riding position. Good for all shapes and sizes, I would say. And so yeah, as for outright power, it's sort of comparable to a modern Honda CRF 250 liquid cooled engine. I mean, that's a much more advanced engine in a lot of ways, but this bike's also a lot lighter, 50 pounds lighter, almost, well, yeah, 40, 50 pounds lighter. So yeah, you know, it moves along. You got enough pep to keep up with traffic anyway. I'm pretty sure I missed my turn. Where am I supposed to turn? I don't need to get lost right now. Not what I need. Okay, well, I did get lost. I said that was the last thing I needed, and I did it anyway. Pretty dumb. Pretty dumb. Alright, well, while we're in this little neighborhood here that I didn't mean to pass through at all, I'm going to talk you through a couple little quirks of the bike. One thing is the blinker switch, which doesn't have a typical push to cancel situation. You left blinker on and then you just sort of flick it back to center. Kind of old school. Kind of like that, you know. And then the mirror, of which there's only one right now, because, you know, we're trying to keep it classy and clean around here. Kind of a narrow field of view, if I'm being honest. And of course, the whole point of it is that it's minimalist, so you don't exactly get maximum mirror performance. There are threaded bosses on either side, and just like any motorcycle that I ever talk about on Daily Rider, you can, of course, switch out the mirrors if that's what you wanted to do. All right, we're back on the track we were supposed to be on, and we're going to hit all these nasty bumps right here with our sweet aftermarket suspension. And the front wheel came off the ground. This is, I mean, frankly, where any dual sport is good in a city, because you slam into all these potholes and nasty bumps and stuff. Not that anyone who owns this bike ultimately is, you know, planning to ride it in the city. I just think it's a good test of suspension, and it's doing great. Surprisingly comfortable to ride, actually, which is the same way I felt about that XL350 that I rode across Wyoming with Ari. Something I suppose we could talk about as we trot down this city street is fuel mileage and range, and to that I say, shut up, who cares? In part because I haven't really tested it, and in part because if fuel mileage and range is really the thing that's top of mind with you riding this bike, then maybe it's not for you. But you figure you're going to get worse mileage because it's carbureted than you might with a modern fuel injected bike, which controls the fuel much more efficiently. Then again, you get pretty good mileage because it's a small engine. Then again, you might get poor mileage if you try and ride it fast. So it's really kind of up in the air. I think you'd be in pretty good shape if you got 100 miles out of a tank. And depending on what terrain you're riding it on, actually, you know what? Not even depending what terrain you're riding it on, 100 miles is going to be enough. You're going to be ready for a break. Let's see what kind of RPM we pull on. If we want to see RPM, we tap this tiny little button over here and we can cycle through some of the stuff that the dash tells us. There we go, 5,400 RPM. Here, going 52 miles an hour-ish in top gear. It's starting to get a little vibey. I mean, it just feels like an old bike, you know? And that's fair, considering that it is. One of the things I really love about a bike like this is it forces me, or encourages me anyway, to step away from normal specs and criticisms that I would lay on a bike for aiming to do one thing and either satisfying that claim or not satisfying it. Vintage bikes, just, you're riding it for a different reason, right? You're riding it because it's special, or you like it has sentimental value, or it has historical value, or you want it in a sweepstakes, whatever it is. And I just find it so elemental and pure and engaging. And even though this bike isn't fast in the world of motorcycles, or really in the world of vehicles, it pulls a lot of emotion out of me. And I think that that's something that's maybe undervalued with bikes like this, is that on paper it doesn't look quote unquote better than any other options you might have in the modern sphere, but in so many ways it is better. It's so much more interesting and dynamic and fun. Alrighty, successfully circumnavigated the highway route, and we are back via surface streets into the usual neighborhood daily rider route, which means a test of stop sign manners. We use footless stops on our carbureted bike. At least we got a disc brake and we've got Ari Henning tuning, so I feel confident. Oh yeah, nice juicy footless stop there. And I think in general what you'll find is that bikes like this one in particular, is pretty easy to ride around in a city, just because it's so light and agreeable. And again, you know, the vintage motorcycle thing, you feel very connected to the machine. There's not a lot that isn't visceral and being transmitted quite directly to the rider. That's both good and bad, but around town, I think it's mostly good. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, clutch feels pretty good. It's like, again, very, very direct. It does do the thing that old clutches do where as it starts to engage, it's like right at the end of the engagement, it kind of goes, and it like catches all at once. It's just not as, I don't know, the technology and design is not as refined as modern bikes, and so that is something that I notice. I guess for me, it just reminds me of riding around on air-cooled Hondas when I was a kid. So it's got too much nostalgia for me to consider it a bad thing. But aside from plucking at your heartstrings, there are lots of reasons that a bike like this is good in this environment. And it's the stuff we've talked about up to this point, right? It's small, it's approachable, it's easy, it's simple, it's not fast. Especially if you live in a place where the roads are extra crummy. Then, you know, the big wheels and the soft tires and the long suspension, that'll be even better. Really good. Fill the stop. One thing about bikes that are extra light, and I'm a somewhat heavy rider, I mean, I'm probably more than 200 pounds with gear on, is I feel like I can control the bike pretty well at low speed with my body weight, right? That's one thing that the footless stop game sort of has as a facet, is being able to control the attitude of the bike with your body. And when you weigh, you know, a good portion of what the bike weighs, it's a lot easier to control, which is good, indicative of why it's a good round town bike, I suppose. Here we are on Lover's Lane, where we can talk about passenger accommodations, and no, there's no passenger accommodations. Get out of here. What did you, I mean, I don't even, are there passenger pegs? No, there's no passenger pegs. If you're gonna have a passenger on here, it's almost more appropriate that there are no passenger pegs. Just, you know, the person will probably be in a bathing suit with a towel around their shoulders anyway, and they'll be barefoot, and they can dangle their feet near the hot exhaust and the spokes flying around. It'll be just like the 70s. That's how it should be anyway. Quick disclaimer, daily rider does not recommend riding a motorcycle without a gear, and none of what I say should be taken seriously. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Jokes aside, there's no passenger accommodations, and who fucking cares? Between you and me and the stop sign. Oh jeez, I screwed up that one. Okay. Stay focused, Zack. This is great. I don't think I really expected. I didn't ride this bike a lot at all because we're trying to keep it cherry for whoever wins it, and I didn't really spend a lot of time on twisty paved roads because it's not what the bike's for. It wasn't what it was designed for in 1970 whatever, and it's not what it's for now, but it's just such a hoot. It handles great. I mean, part of it's just that it's so light, but it's surprisingly balanced and kind of like also planted and secure. It doesn't feel flighty and unstable in any way like some dirt bikes do when you ride them on the street. And the old Golden Boys are grippy as heck too. I feel quite a bit of confidence going through these corners. I wasn't expecting it. Dynamite. All right, ducking out of the twisty road section now. I'm surprisingly disappointed about that. It's got a Street Triple RS. That's a good choice for a twisty road, and any road really. That's a good bike. Hopefully my man there's got some respect for this this old dog here. Off we go. All right, we got a yellow light. Let's talk about brakes, shall we? Again, this is that disc brake. Let's see here. Oh geez, let me stop. Whoop, okay, I locked it up. So you got to be careful of that. There's no ABS. If that wasn't clear. It's not a ton of braking performance, but remember, this is a slow motorcycle that does not weigh very much, and you only need as much brake as you have traction. And as I just demonstrated there, knobby tires on pavement, there's always limited traction, and if you can lock it up, that's enough. What I should be doing is using more rear brake along with my front brake like they taught you at MSF, Zack. There we go. That's a much more controlled stop. Good job. And I'm in the right lane here very intentionally because there's our little urban jump here coming up. This big tree root situation. On the side of the road. Here we go. 4th gear, 40 miles an hour. You know, never growing up has some drawbacks in life, but it also has some big wins. Stuff like that makes me laugh. I love it. Nice planted landing too from the old vintage XL250. All right, so as our ride is winding down now, we do have some stuff to cover. I said I was going to talk about how the bike rides, how it compares to modern motorcycles. We've talked about that to some extent, and as a recap, you know, it's lesser than modern motorcycles in some ways. You know, the suspension might not be as supple, the engine might not be as smooth, that kind of thing, but it's kind of rich in other ways, and in ways that I think you know, make the bike feel special and feel different, which is kind of what you want when you're riding an old bike, I think. And I'm not going to go into a full history lesson here about which dual sport came first, and I think it was not technically the XL250, but it was the part of that first generation of dual sport bikes from Japan, like the DT1 from Yamaha that Ari rode across Wyoming and I did a daily ride on, for what it's worth. Bikes that were designed to go off-road from Japan were kind of street bikes with high exhausts on them, you know, like scrambler kind of things. And this generation of bike in the early 70s was when Japanese manufacturers started really making dirt bikes, and I think sort of most crucially and specifically and interestingly, dirt bikes that were dual sports, dirt bikes that could be ridden on the road and could be ridden off-road. How many they made, all the Japanese manufacturers, is not even possible for me to go into in the next 250 yards that I have here. But I grew up on a Honda XR80 and then a Honda XR250 with a headlight on it, and I had an XL75 around, and those bikes are sort of like what turned me into an enthusiast, what allowed me to learn how to ride and how to be and feel like a motorcycle. And all of those bikes look back to this generation of Honda XLs, of Honda single-cylinder air-cooled dual sports from the early 70s, and that makes it special. That makes the era special, and that makes the bike special. And the fact that this bike has been totally, you know, restored and modified and modernized is even cooler. But at its core, even, it is special and unique. Now, as we turn on to the dirt road shortcut, let's take a moment to appreciate that I'm riding a one-of-a-kind motorcycle that my company, my employer, is going to give away to one of you lucky Daily Rider Shop Manual viewers. And so I'm going to take it easy here, but we are going to bump down a dirt road because this is a dirt bike, gosh darn it, and we're obligated. So off we go. No ride modes to change, no ABS to turn off. This is it. And man, if this kind of terrain is what you have around you, if this is where you're going to ride the bike when you win that sweepstakes, you're in good shape. It'll do this all flippin' day long. Heck, it'll do it all the way across Wyoming, or at least its big brother will, and for that reason I assume this bike can do it too. Yeah, hit jumps, slide around a little bit. It's excellent. And now the tires are dirty, and I'll wash the bike off so that it's nice and clean for whoever gets it next. I hope whoever gets it decides to get it dirty a little bit, every now and then at least. Okay, we're gonna have to slow way down to decide if this thing will wheelie or not. I'm gonna go to first gear, and we're gonna... I mean, I'm sure it'll do a wheelie, but I'm gonna take it easy on the clutch. I'm gonna take it easy on my shoulder sockets. I'm gonna take it easy. The truth is, if you want to do wheelies, a bike that's a little bit less special and has a slightly better power to weight ratio is, or at least a shorter wheelbase, is how I'd recommend you practice. All right, one final sprint to the office here, everybody. Off we go. All right, the final test here of can you back it in, and yeah, probably. Oh my gosh, oh, it's really scary. It's not exactly a hooligan machine here, and if you can get the feel of that rear drum bake, you can probably get a little back in here. Yeah, I got a little one. Those golden boys, they just got so much grip, you know? So much grip. No spaces to do the U-turn challenge. Oh, heck. All right, well, we'll do it 70s style then. We'll go pop through here, and we'll go skid to a stop. And then we'll peel around. You know, one parking space as long as you break all the rules. Okie doke, everybody. The Cycle Gear 50th anniversary XL250. There you have it. What a handsome machine. It's so cool. Oh, let's take a look at the rear blinker here, just so I have the bike running. Give you an idea of what you're working with. Kind of nifty, huh? And then obviously I can't reach the brake lever and show you, but the LEDs light up. Auto cancel signals too, for what it's worth. Pretty nifty. Okay. What happened to the gas cap? All right, everybody, there you have it. Practically 4 months of Ari Henning's life and blood, sweat, and tears, all sort of reviewed and critiqued in 20 minutes or so. Obviously, there's so much more to this bike than we covered here, but hopefully you get a feel of what it's like to ride around on a Resto Mod 50-year-old dual sport. Of course, a reminder that this motorcycle could be yours in the Cycle Gear 50th anniversary sweepstakes, alongside a brand new Honda Transalp. All you gotta do is click in the link in the description of this video, enter the sweepstakes, and you might have 2 new motorcycles in your garage. No Instagram questions this time around because we couldn't burn the surprise of the bike and the sweepstakes by me posting on Instagram ahead of time. Stick with me, we'll put the sucker on the Daily Rider Classics leaderboard, and you'll be good to go. All right, everybody, here we are. We have an XL250 from 1974, shop manual custom, ready to go on the Daily Rider Classics leaderboard. As a reminder, if you're not familiar with the Classics board, we have the Versus 650 Battletoad at the top. That was from a CTXP episode, going to the track with $1,000 motorcycles. BMW R80 GS from my dad's garage on here. We got the Honda RC30, one of the most beautiful and famous super bikes in history. My personal KTM, last of the 2-stroke RZ350, Dave the Gixxer, Yamaha DT1, which is actually in the house. It's right there. There it is. And then the Trail 90 Ari rode across Alaska, and the Honda Winnebago Moto Home that Ari built and subjected himself to. Before we dive into where we think the XL250 will fall on the leaderboard, just a quick note. I found the gas cap. I found it. It was in the street. You probably saw. I got it though. Don't worry. We'll get a new one. We're gonna get a new one. We'll get a new one, I think. Yeah. The XL250. Where do we think it falls? An obvious competitor, Yamaha DT1 from 1969. You know, it's 5 years prior, 2-stroke. The DT1 was not a particularly good daily rider, if you'll remember. I'm looking at it now, and you know what? It doesn't have Golden Boys on it. I thought that we used Golden Boys to go across Wyoming, but we didn't at all. These are other tires. I lied to you. The Trail 90 that went across Alaska, that had Golden Boys on it. Point is, they're pretty good tires.
The DT1 was not a great daily ride. It is it's two-stroke. It's a little bit ornery. It's sort of loud and clattery, and the gearbox is a little finicky, and the suspension was kind of clapped out. The XL250 in some ways has similar feelings, except that XL250 is like, well, it's a resto mod. It's a restoration modification machine, or restored and modified machine, and that benefits it hugely. Not just because you can adjust how fast the blinkers blink on the Bluetooth app on your phone and myriad other things within the electronics, but because it has modern suspension. It's got that modern disc brake that Ari fitted on there and a newly upholstered seat, and that really makes the bike feel old but new again in a way that is much better for your daily ride. So I would say it's better than the DT1. The XL250 is better than the DT1. The RZ350 from 1985, last of the two strokes, sort of. It's a street bike. It's not a dual sport, right? So it's sort of made to have brakes and tires and suspension that sends you down the road in a way that feels appropriate. So I don't think, if you asked me to ride to work on an XL250 or that RZ was a peach. It was such a treat. It was so kind of like good, so much better than I thought it was going to be. So that means, it comes down to this: is the XL250 TSM Resto Mod better than Dave the Gixxer as a street bike? Dave, the 55,000 mile GSXR 1000 that we bought for CTXP, dash doesn't really work, and it's uncomfortable, and has 100 and something horsepower, and has good brakes and that kind of thing. It's a tough, which bike would I rather own, have in my garage? Oh, that XL250 in a heartbeat. If you want me to commute across a small town, the XL. A city, Los Angeles, I'm going Dave the Gixxer. It's very close. It's very, very close. I don't know, and which bike would I sort of recommend for a daily ride? That's really tough. That's really tough. This is tough. My job's tough, everybody. I'm gonna give the nod to the XL. I'm saying XL250 over Dave the Gixxer. That'll be a bit of a controversial pick because the 2006 GSXR 1000 is a pretty darn good motorcycle for a lot of different things. But the XL it's more comfortable. It's a little more stately. It's got the heart because it was made in this here garage. It was reborn on the TSM set right there. So you got to give it some street cred for that. That's a tough call. But you know what? It's the classics board. It's all from the heart in one way or another. Anyway, I hope you're satisfied with the rankings, and if you're not, I hope you were satisfied with the ride. As we close it out here, I will remind you that you can learn more about that bike and how it was made in the link in the description of this video for Ari's shop manual episode, and you can enter the sweepstakes to win it alongside a Honda Transalp. I feel like I've given you some information and lots of opportunity to learn more and perhaps even win something in this episode of Shop Manual. So I'm going to try to quit while I'm ahead. We'll see you next time, everybody. Later.
Ari added gold valve emulators to the fork for more... There's Ari now. He's looking at me talking about his bike. That was fun. The fork is actually from a CRF 250F.